Welcome to an incredible story that will inspire you and improve your English skills at the same time. Today we're diving into the life of Albert Einstein, a man who changed the world with his ideas and courage. As you listen, focus on the new phrases and vocabulary. I'll introduce this. It's not just about learning English. It's about learning how persistence and curiosity can lead to greatness. So grab a notebook, pay close attention, and let's begin this journey. To improve your listening, expand your vocabulary, and find motivation in the life of a genius. Albert Einstein was born on March 14th, 1879, in a small town called Ulm in Germany. His parents, Hermann Einstein and Pauline Kuch, were ordinary people. Hermann was a businessman who worked with electrical parts, while Pauline was a homemaker who loved music and learning. When Albert was born, there was nothing extraordinary about him except for one small detail. His head was unusually large. His family even joked about it, wondering if he would grow up to be a normal child. Little did they know this. Boy would grow up to change the world. Albert was a very quiet child. He didn't speak his first words until he was almost 3 years old. This worried his parents. Some people thought there was something wrong with him. His family called him the quiet one because he rarely spoke even when other children around him were chatting away. But Albert wasn't quiet because he was slow. He was quiet because he was always thinking. He would sit for hours observing the world around him as if he was trying to understand how everything worked. When Albert was 5 years old, his father gave him a small gift that would change his life forever. It was a simple compass. At first, Albert didn't understand how it worked. How could the needle always point north? No matter how he turned it. He became obsessed with this tiny object. He stared at it for hours, trying to figure out the invisible force that guided the needle. This was the first time Albert realized that there were unseen forces in the world, and he wanted to discover them all. He later said that experience left a deep and lasting impression on me. When Albert started school, things didn't go well. He didn't like the way his teachers taught. Back then, schools were very strict, and students were expected to memorize everything, but Albert wasn't interested in memorizing. In fact, he wanted to ask questions and find answers. His teachers often got angry with him. One teacher even told him, "You're a disgrace. You'll never be successful in life." These words hurt, but Albert didn't let them stop him. Albert struggled with some subjects, especially languages. But there was one subject he loved more than anything: mathematics. He called it the language of the universe and enjoyed solving problems like puzzles. Despite his struggles in school, Albert's family believed in him. His mother, Pauline, noticed his love for music and encouraged him to learn the violin. At first, Albert didn't like practicing, but over time, music became a way for him to relax and think clearly. His uncle Jacob also played a big role in shaping his mind. Jacob loved math and would teach Albert in a fun and creative way. He once told Albert, "Math is like a treasure hunt. Every problem is a clue that leads you to the solution." This playful approach made Albert fall in love with numbers. Albert wasn't like other children. While others played game, he spent hours reading books and imagining how the world worked. He loved stories about great scientists and often dreamed of making discoveries of his own. One day while walking home from school, Albert asked himself what would it be like to ride a beam of light. This question stayed with him for years. It was the beginning of his lifelong journey to understand light space. And time when Albert was 15 years old, his life took a difficult turn. His father's business failed, and the family had to move to Italy. Albert stayed behind in Germany to finish school, but he hated being away from his family. He felt not lonely and unhappy. Eventually, Albert decided to leave school without finishing. He couldn't stand the strict rules and harsh teachers anymore. Instead, he started studying on his own. He read books on science, philosophy, and mathematics, teaching himself everything. He wanted to know this was a risky decision many people thought he had, ruined his future by leaving school. But Albert didn't care. He believed that learning was more important than not following rules. At 16, Albert wrote his first scientific paper. It wasn't perfect, but it showed his incredible potential. He also applied to a prestigious school in Switzerland called the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School. However, he failed the entrance exam because he struggled with non-science subjects like French and history. Instead of giving up, Albert decided to try again. He worked harder than ever before, improving his weak areas and refusing to let failure define him. Albert Einstein's early life was filled with struggles and doubts. People didn't understand him, and he faced rejection and failure, but he never gave up his curiosity, determination, and love for dot. Learning kept him going. Albert Einstein was determined to make something of his life. After leaving Germany, he moved to Switzerland, a country known for its modern education system. Switzerland was different from Germany. The schools were less strict, and students were encouraged to think freely. This was exactly what Albert needed. At the age of 17, Albert tried again to get into the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. This time, he passed. However, his troubles weren't over yet, even though he was finally studying at one of the best schools in Europe. Albert's rebellious nature made it hard for him to fit in. Albert loved studying mathematics and physics, but he wasn't interested in other subjects. His professors didn't understand his way of thinking. Some of them even disliked him because he didn't follow their teaching methods. One professor said, "You are a smart boy, Einstein, but you lack discipline." Albert wasn't the best student in his class. He often skipped lectures and studied on his own while his classmates followed the curriculum. Albert spent his time exploring deeper questions. What is light? How does time work? Why does gravity exist? These weren't ordinary questions, and most people didn't have answers for them. During his time at the Polytechnic, Albert met a young woman named Miva Marich, the only female physics student in his class. Miva was brilliant, and she shared Albert's passion for science. The two of them became close, often spending hours discussing scientific theories. Miva wasn't just Albert's classmate. She became his closest companion. They inspired each other and dreamed of a future where they could make important discoveries together. Albert once wrote to her, "Together, we will conquer the power world of science." However, their relationship wasn't easy. Miva faced criticism for being a woman in science, and Albert struggled with financial difficulties. But despite the challenges, they supported each other. and stayed. Focused on their dreams in 1900 at the age of 21, Albert graduated from the Polytechnic with a degree in physics. He was excited about starting his career as a scientist, but life had other plans. Albert couldn't find a job he applied to. Several universities hoping to become a professor or researcher, but he was rejected every time. His professors didn't give him good recommendations because they thought he was unmotivated. This was a painful time for Albert. Imagine working hard for years only to face rejection after rejection. But Albert didn't give up. Instead, he took whatever jobs he could find to support himself. In 1902, Albert finally found a job working as a clerk at the Swiss patent office in Bar. His job was to review patent applications and decide if the inventions were original. It wasn't a glamorous job, and it had nothing to do with physics. At first, Albert was disappointed. He wanted to be a scientist, not a clerk. But instead of complaining, he made the best of his situation. The job gave him free time, and he used that time to think about his scientific ideas. Albert began to call the patent office his thinking lab. While reviewing patents, he would secretly scribble down his thoughts on the nature of light, time, and space. He was determined to pursue his dream, even if it meant working late into the night after finishing his day. Job in 1903. Albert married Miva. The couple had a simple wedding, and soon after they had their first child, a son named Hans. Albert Einstein. Although they were happy together, life wasn't easy. Albert's salary as a clerk wasn't enough to support his family. They lived in a small apartment and struggled to make ends meet. Albert's friends often advised him to give up on his scientific dreams and focus on his job. But Albert refused. He said, "I would rather struggle for my passion than live comfortably without purpose." Despite the hardships, Albert continued to work on his theories. In 1905, at the age of 26, he published a series of papers that would change the world forever. Scientists call this year Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or miracle year. On the photoelectric effect, Albert explained how light behaves like tiny particles called photons. This discovery would later win him the Nobel Prize in Physics. 2. Brownie in motion, he proved the existence of atoms, which was a groundbreaking achievement at the time. 3. Special theory of relativity. This was Albert's most famous work. He introduced the idea that time and space are relative, not absolute. From this theory came the famous equation E del mca2, which showed that energy and matter are interchangeable. These papers shock the scientific community. Albert Einstein, humble clerk with no university position, had just revolutionized physics. After 1905, Albert's life began to change. Scientists around the world started to notice his work. He was offered teaching positions and became a professor at several universities. Finally, his hard work and determination were paying off. But Albert didn't let success get to his head. He continued to ask big questions and push the boundaries of science. He believed that knowledge was infinite and that curiosity was the key to understanding the universe. Albert Einstein's journey from a struggling clerk to a world-renowned scientist is a testament to the power of perseverance. He faced rejection, poverty, and doubt. But he never let go of his passion for science. His story teaches us that failure is not the end, it's a step. Towards success, to believing in yourself, is more important than seeking approval from others. 3. Big dreams require big sacrifices by